Hey guys, we need to talk about Solana. So welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Solana and the absolute moon mission that it has been on. It is currently up from the local low here back in September, currently up 251%. Very impressive, and it doesn't seem to be showing any signs of slowing down recently. It is currently trading above $60 as I record this on the 11th, and it really looks like Solana is targeting these general levels somewhere between $75 and $87, acted as resistance back here, support throughout here, and then we slice down through going into the Terra Luna collapse. And in some ways it would make sense for Solana to be targeting a similar level to before the Terra Luna collapse. We've seen other assets already go and erase that move. So for example, Bitcoin with its push up has done the same thing. It's gotten back up above the levels right before we had the Terra Luna collapse, which then dumped its price down further. So there's some symmetry there. Though of course that's very speculative. That doesn't maybe mean much, but it's a similar general targets that Solana is now targeting to where Bitcoin has gotten to. And just given the strength here, I think it's a reasonable expectation. I think that this might be the next area of potential resistance that it could face. But I think the broader question we have here is, when do we think Solana might start slowing down? So regardless of those kind of technical levels, what can we look at to think, when is this parabolic movement going to slow down? Because it will slow down eventually. Markets don't move straight up forever. There's going to be some point at which Solana has to stop and catch its breath, at the very least consolidate, maybe even have to correct. And so that's where I like to look at some of our models that we have over at our website, polaritydigital.io. Link in the description if you want to check that out. So this one I'm showing you here is our short-term upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI. So this is a risk model. So basically higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk. And more specifically, when you're up at the top of the scale at 5, that's the top of the scale, that's saying that the plausible upside in the short term is minimal and the plausible downside is quite large. And then vice versa, when you're down at the bottom of the scale, that means the remaining downside is quite limited and then the remaining upside potential is quite large. And we're currently seeing Solana really shooting to the upside on its short-term UDPI. It's currently at a 3.29. So getting up to levels that is only seen really twice before, when it went up to this peak in September of 21, and then when it went up to the all-time high in November of 21. And so looking at this, it seems like Solana slowing down soon would make sense. But that being said, I do think that the entire range of this is probably in play, and that it wouldn't surprise me if we do get above 4 on Solana, or even target in on these highest levels. That Solana really does look like it wants to be using up as much of its short-term upside potential as it has with the way it's been behaving. So it would not surprise me if we get up to the highest levels on that scale. But then with that in mind, then how can we think of, when is that weakness going to be identifiable? How can we see something that would actually tell us when it's done realizing this plausible upside potential, and then when it's ready to put in that local high? And so that's where I'm going to be personally looking at our TCI. This is going to be one of the models I'm going to be watching, our trend confidence indicator for Solana. So basically the TCI tells you how confident should you be in a given trend. If you see price moving up and the TCI trending up with it, that's a good sign. But then if we see the TCI moving down while price continues to move up, that's a bad sign. So for example, over here, September 21, the TCI was falling off rapidly while we were still seeing this appreciation in price. That's an early warning that we're getting to exhaustion with this move up, and that a notable top might be coming soon, that there was some weakness in this uptrend, that it wasn't likely to just keep ripping higher and higher and higher for too much longer. Indeed, that's what we saw. And so more recently, we've ripped to the upside on the TCI with Solana. So even before this trend really began, we started moving up aggressively on the TCI, and then that moved into this big move we've been seeing here. But we've continued the uptrend on the TCI. We're continuing to set in higher highs and higher lows until we really break out of that structure, start seeing some notable weakness on the TCI. I think what that would suggest to me is that the trend is still relatively healthy, or at least as healthy as it can be in a parabolic movement. But then if we see the TCI start to really break down, that would be a sign that I would look at to say, all right, this is probably the local top, or at least close to it, and that we might then need to take a break, maybe either correct or consolidate for a while. So short term, those are the two things I'm going to be watching. That we're getting quite overheated based on the short term UDPI, and so I do think we're getting near to wherever that local top will be. but then something like the TCI can help us with more fidelity, maybe identify when it forms. So obviously not financial advice, you can make of these data as you will, but that's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at across them. But importantly, overheating in the short term doesn't necessarily mean that Solana is overheating in the long term. If we go ahead and look over at our long-term upside downside potential indicator for Solana, that's what I'm showing you here. This cares about moves that play out over months to years, even much more macro in its focus. We can see that it is starting to chew up a decent amount of longer term upside potential, but it's not anywhere close to the top of this scale. So what you might expect to happen would be maybe a reasonable expectation. We really overheat on the short-term UDPI, set in a local top somewhere, maybe up in this range here. And then the long-term UDPI kind of finds its kind of topping point at this lower level, sort of like what we saw over here maybe, or over here. And then we might have to correct, we have to consolidate for a while, and that could let long-term risk cool off, as well as short-term risk over here cool off, which could then set the stage for that next leg up. That's tend to be what you see. You'll see these moves up on the short-term UDPI in a cool-off phase, and it allows for another move up, more cooling off, which allows for the next move up. Similar thing, the long-term UDPI, just more macro in its focus. Move up, cooling off, which allows for that next move up. You'll notice how we bounced right off of right around -4, just above it, -3.9. Very similar level to where we started this move here, off of this move where we now shot off to the upside. And what you might just see is similar to like over here, where you have this cooling off period of the long-term UDPI, which can then set the stage for that next move up. So certainly nothing's guaranteed, but that's going to be the general pattern of effects that I'm going to be watching for. I think it's a very possible and reasonable expectation that that kind of thing could play out, which might set the stage for a longer, more macro uptrend for Solana. And it might really depend also on just how broader markets behave. If Bitcoin continues to move up from here, if it continues up, if it gets ahead and, you know, targets 40K and starts testing those levels, then that would just be more broader fuel for the crypto market to continue moving up. And then whenever Bitcoin finds its local top and corrects, that could still allow for other altcoins to be able to move up as well. And so that's where I think with Solana, there still is a potential for it to move higher. But in the short term, I think we might think that something like this range would be a logical place for it to catch its breath, somewhere around this general zone. And that might very well coincide with when the short-term UDPI is getting really overextended up here. We start seeing weakness on the TCI, and then we'd also maybe want to see the long-term UDPI cool off before we might think that Solana can then go and target its all-time high and maybe break out above that. So we'll have to wait and see how this all develops, but those are some of the things that I'm going to be looking at now. So if you want to view live data from our models and more, you can go over to our website, polaritydigital.io. Again, link is in the description. And if you like the content, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates about our models and more over there.